This is episode 362 of the Rio Grande Foundation's Tipping Point, New Mexico. I'm Paul Gessing, president of the Rio Grande Foundation, New Mexico's free market think tank. You can find out more about the foundation at riograndefoundation.org. I am very pleased to be joined this week by Jennifer Rivera. She is the executive director, which is a fancy name for principal, at a charter school of the Estancia Valley Classical Academy. Welcome back to Tipping Point, New Mexico, Jennifer.
Thank you so much for having me back.
Yeah, and if people look through the past shows, they will find Jennifer there, but they will find a different last name, so congratulations.
Thank you.
And we did talk, though, during COVID, so your wedding apparently took place during the lovely COVID time period. So
it did, yes.
Hopefully you went to a free state, or you flouted the laws of the state of New Mexico and had a lot of people at your wedding, and that's great. So congratulations.
Thank you.
But yeah, we want to talk about Estancia Valley Classical Academy, the challenges of education in New Mexico during the pandemic and with all the policies in place. But you being the go-to for us in terms of education, why is Estancia Valley Classical Academy so special? So why don't you just go with it?
Oh, absolutely. So Estancia Valley Classical Academy is very special for so many reasons. First of all, we're a kindergarten through 12th grade school, which in itself is a little bit atypical. We house all of our kindergarten through our senior students in one building, and we really are a community. And I say that not only for our students, but our teachers and our families. We really are a close-knit community, and we try to stay in really close communication with each other and just kind of help each other the way that a family would. And in some more, the school is very special because of our curriculum and because a classical school, the model of classical education is this idea of teaching the entire student. So we're not necessarily after, taking students at a young age and asking, okay, what do you want to do when you're an adult? What job do you want to have? It's more of educating the students in a way where they can critically think through problems and really just be strong critical thinkers, so that when they are adults, no matter what they choose to do, if they want to go to college, if they want to go to the military, if they want to go into the workforce, whatever it is that they want to do, they have the ability to do anything. They can think for themselves. They can come up with arguments. They can understand logic and the importance of evidence in their arguments, and just be able to think through situations. And then going more into kind of the education of the whole person. One of the things that we strive to teach at EvCA is this idea of virtue, having virtuous citizens who graduate from our school and learn virtue and learn character while they're in the school, and have the opportunity to really practice being a virtuous citizen. And we all make mistakes, that's part of the learning process. So we work to model what we call our pillars of character. And, when students mess up, we have conversations with them, and we try to turn discipline more into a learning situation. The curriculum at EvCA is pretty structured. We are a Barney charter school initiative charter school, and what that means is Hillsdale College created this initiative for charter schools around the country, and EvCA was actually the second BCSI school that Hillsdale College supported in the nation. So we're really proud of that.
Yeah, and that was very exciting. And of course, you guys have some exciting news to report recently, and that is that you'll be with us. At least the school will be with us.
Yes.
Hopefully you too, but you'll be with us for at least 5 more years.
Yes.
Talk about that.
That's correct. So As a charter school in New Mexico, it's not anything that's out of the routine or because there was, something bad that happened. All charter schools in New Mexico have to go through a charter renewal process. And for EvCA, it happens every 5 years. And it's kind of an extensive process to go through a charter renewal. There are petitions that have to be signed by families of students and our faculty and staff. And then there's an application process that the school has to fill out. There's a site visit from the charter school division at the public education department. And so they send representatives to the school. They're on campus for a couple of days, observing our teachers, walking through our hallways, just that type of thing. And then after the site visit, they develop a report, and then the school goes through an actual hearing process. So our hearing took place last Wednesday, December 8th, up in Santa Fe, and the outcome could not have been better. We received our charter renewal for 5 years with no conditions, which that's the best outcome we could have asked for. And we were actually very excited because we received what's called an expedited renewal, which means in our application process, we didn't have to fill out the portion for academics because our academics are strong enough to speak for themselves. We were what's called a spotlight school, which means the top 25% academically in New Mexico.
That is very cool. So congratulations again on that. Now, just to clarify, Public Education Commission, is that who you were before?
Okay, no. So yes, the Public Education
yes.
Commission.
Okay.
Yeah. So there's all these acronyms. So the Public Education Department has a subdivision called the Charter School Division. And so that's who actually came and did the site visit, and they write the report. However, the hearing and the vote itself, that is the Public Education Commission, which is it's a commission of 10 members who are elected officials. And so the hearing takes place in front of them. They get to ask questions, and then they officially vote.
Yeah. As a board member of a charter school myself, the charter school law in New Mexico is interesting. It's an older law, and unfortunately it hasn't been updated in ways that other states have, partially because charter schools have been under attack from the powers that be in Santa Fe. So there's a leeriness about opening up that law for a lot of changes, for the fear that some of the anti-charter forces will come in and gut the law entirely. But New Mexico basically has two chartering entities. One is the Public Education Commission, which nobody realizes really even exists because it used to be until Bill Richardson, the governor, it used to be much more involved in education policy. There was no public education department secretary. It was the PEC. Now the PEC is kind of in this charter school management role at the state level. And then you can go to your local district and say, hey, we'd like to use some of the money that you guys have now and build a really great charter school. And that's a tough conversation to have with those local districts. So the fact that you all are chartered through the state Public Education Commission is the same as our charter school, which is a Connections Academy virtual charter school. And anyway, it's not a surprise that you would go that path. And I've heard that they are a little more reasonable up at the PEC than maybe they have been in years past. So I don't know, was that your recollection or your involvement?
I felt like they were very, very reasonable. The questions that they asked were questions that made sense, that, they should know about what's going on in the school. And all of the responses that we received were very positive. So I felt like it was a great experience.
Good. Well, I'm glad to hear that. And, when you're doing so well academically in a state that is so challenged academically in so many areas, that's got to be, really pleasing to yourself, but it also provides good ammunition. Now, it has been we're getting on to 2 years in education. Just give us the kind of personal experience of the last couple of years dealing with the policies coming out of Santa Fe and just the challenges that your kids are facing. What's it been like?
The the challenges have been quite a learning experience, I'll say that. I have to give a huge shout out to the staff and faculty at EvCA because this has been a really difficult time in education, and all of our faculty and staff, and honestly even our families and students, have done everything that they can to remain positive and think of this as a time of perseverance and just really learning opportunities. So I think really one of the biggest challenges that COVID presented happened last school year, when we had to move into a fully online model. So eventually we did have the option to go hybrid, which, allowed the students to be on campus half the time and then learning remote at home half the time. But before hybrid was an option, all of our students, kindergarten through senior, had to be fully remote. And being an online student in high school is hard enough, finding that self-motivation, being able to read information yourself, that's challenging in and of itself. So when you think of elementary students, grammar school students doing online, we had kindergarten students who their first day of school was in front of a computer screen, and they're not able to read instructions themselves or read a lesson themselves. So doing class online was extremely difficult, and our teachers were amazing. They did pre-recorded lessons for every single class day so that students could watch the lesson, rewatch it if they needed to, rewind it, pause it, go at their own pace. And then all of our teachers also did online Zoom office hours so that they could have face-to-face interaction with students and still have discussions and still give students the opportunity to have their questions answered. So our teachers really just went above and beyond and learned a lot just with the integration of technology. We used an online platform called Canvas. And they did a fabulous job adjusting to what the students needed and for what was right for the students at the time.
Now, how long were you totally virtual? And I assume you tried to get back in the classrooms as quickly as possible. But one of the challenges of being a charter school is that you're still ultimately taking orders from the governor.
Correct.
And, so you got to salute and shut up.
As a charter school, we are a public school. So we do follow all of the guidelines and regulations that are passed down by the public education department. We did make it a priority to do what was right for students. And so at every opportunity that we had to get students into the classroom, we did that the first possible day. So our grammar school, our kindergarten through sixth grade, they were only in remote at the beginning of the school year, and we were able to shift them into hybrid. I honestly don't remember, but it was only a few weeks that they were in online before they were able to shift to hybrid, and we were able to have them face to face. Our upper school, however, they did not get to come back into school until I believe March. So they were in remote the majority of the school year last year.
Yeah, and that's a real challenge for all schools in the state of New Mexico, because as much as you might not like the policy, the governor has asserted not just control over charter schools, but also private schools around the state. And a few have, skirted the law, but you're certainly very challenged in that regard. And it is worth noting that on the plus side, you said public school, and that also means that there's no tuition to attend Estancia Valley Classical Academy. People often are confused by that. And
Right.
we talked before the show started. Folks are looking for schools for next year.
Absolutely.
You have openings, right?
We currently have some openings in a variety of grades. And, things happen over the summer. So that's one of the things that I try to tell families, if there's not necessarily an open seat in their grade, or if, maybe there's not as many as they were hoping for their kiddos. Things do change over the summer. People move, they have unexpected things happen. So some of our lower grades that currently don't have openings, they might have openings that take place. And then our upper school currently does have openings in all grades except for 8th at the moment. So, but again, that could change. And we have our lottery is going to be coming up soon in the spring. So
And how do people get into that lottery?
it's very simple, actually. We have what's called a letter of intent, which all it is it's a form on our website. And if people have a hard time filling out forms on websites, they can call. We can help them through it. Or they can come to the school and fill it out in person. And all it is you give the name of the student, the grade that they're wanting to get into for next school year, their birthday, and then we just need a way to contact families. So we ask for a phone number or an email address, and that's it. As long as you submit that information, your student can be in our lottery.
Excellent. Well, something that all parents across New Mexico and quite frankly across the country have been dealing with, all parents, students, everybody. A lot of the reports that we've looked at, we've relayed how harmful being out of the classroom has been, mental health wise, academic performance as well. And I know your school is a high performing school, but it's tough to maintain those top standards virtually. So can you talk about just your own impressions of how the pandemic and the pandemic policies and the masks and everything have impacted your students, as well as academic performance and just the challenges you and they've faced together?
Yeah, absolutely. So to start off, I'll go back to last year when we were in remote, because I think that was, as far as mental, emotional, damaging. The students, some of the students were in isolation.
Mm-hmm.
If their parents did work out of the house and they were left at home alone to do their schoolwork, that was very difficult. We had some students who ended up needing to work themselves to help the family earn money. And so that made it a challenge to focus on education and make school a priority. And we did get reports. So I will say our attendance, we have a couple of people at EvCA who work on attendance, and they did a phenomenal job last year in the way that none of our students fell off of our radar. So we did have some students who stopped attending, and their attendance became an issue. And by reaching out to them in a variety of ways, we called parents, we called students. There was one particular student we had a hard time getting a hold of, so our dean of students actually went to his work to have a conversation with them. So just kind of through our attendance efforts and monitoring of grades, because like you said, keeping up academics in a time when school wasn't necessarily the priority for students the way that it would have been when they were face to face, we did find out that there were a handful of students who were really struggling with mental health in ways that was just completely damaging to who they were as people. And we actually reached out to the public education department at that time, because we were allowed to have small groups for special education students who needed support academically based on their IEPs. And we got special permission to have a couple of small groups for emotional health purposes so that students wouldn't be isolated. So we did have approximately, I believe, 8 students who were invited to the school to have a small group so that they wouldn't be isolated and could receive emotional and mental health support at that time. This year, the challenges are different. I'm so thankful that the students are back in the building full time, able to learn from, people face to face and interact with their friends and their classmates. And so our biggest challenge, I would say this year, as far as the mandates and the guidance goes, is number one, just the paperwork to make sure that we're in compliance with everything. There are testing or vaccination regulations that our staff and faculty have to abide by in order to come to work. And everybody in the building, regardless of vaccination status, is required to wear the face covering indoors. So as far as, communicating the material, that's a bit more challenging for our teachers and our students as well. So that has been an ongoing challenge this school year.
Yeah, and definitely want to talk a little bit more about that. But your school is located in the east mountains of Albuquerque suburbs. It's located, in Edgewood?
Yeah, we are in Edgewood, New Mexico, which is approximately 25 minutes.
Yeah.
East of Albuquerque on the freeway. So it's a short drive. It's not bad at all.
But internet access, broadband.
Yeah.
Edgewood is not the Silicon Valley, to say the least. It's not even downtown Albuquerque. Broadband has become an issue. A lot of folks see it as some kind of panacea. It's going to require or going to receive broadband as a broad, area of the state budget, a lot of attention, because New Mexico does not have as good of connectivity. We're a big state with a relatively sparse population. How much of an obstacle was that for your school as well as for the families involved in your school? Obviously, that's a very second best to third best option, but you were kind of required to, for about a year, really engage with the broadband system.
Right. And it did prove to be a challenge for some families. We did have things like Chromebooks that we lent out to families and students who needed the technology. However, the internet access itself still proved to be an issue for many families. And there was support that the state offered as far as, getting internet connectivity for families and things like that. But where we are in our rural community, it's not necessarily always a money issue. It's not always that the family can't afford internet. There are places where it's just not available. There's different places where people live that have different obstacles to internet, and it was not an option to some families. We did offer families paper packets if they were in a situation where they could not do online school. And so they would have to drive to the school and pick up a packet and then drive back to the school and turn it in each week. But that was a way that we tried to work with families who just really could not have internet access.
Yeah. That's. Do you think broadband and, do you think it will help in the education system? Obviously, assuming that we kind of move forward in person, like is broadband, this is kind of like closing the barn door after the horses left, because holy cow, we realize that totally virtual education doesn't work very well without a robust broadband system. Well, let's all hope and pray that we're not doing virtual education as a state for 100 years, next pandemic, 100 years from now. But how much of a benefit is this going to be for your students, your school, moving forward if there's all this spending, more robust broadband?
EvCA in and of itself doesn't... I'm not sure that it would actually help our school in the future. We do have technology that we use within the school, but it's limited. We use it for things like iStation testing, Lexia. There's some other intervention tools that we use. However, we have what we need in order to use those tools. We are, I don't want to say we're low tech, but we only use technology within the classroom in a way that will serve the students and help them understand the material better. But we at EvCA mainly rely on primary source documents and actual books that we read in our hands. So
Yeah, no, I totally appreciate that. That's not your model. You're not a virtual school by definition. You're not a extraordinarily tech heavy school. And quite honestly, I think that is to your favor and benefit as an institution. But that's a personal opinion there. So I do want to retouch on the mask issue. Being a charter school under the state, you have to abide by the governor and her whims, shall we say, on masks. My kids as well, even though two of them go to a Catholic school, so a private school, they are also forced to wear face coverings. How difficult is that? How much of it, just as an educator, how do you feel about that more as at a personal level, and how does it impact their mental health and their learning? But also, I assume you have to abide by that.
we do. So just like you said, we are a public school, so all of the guidelines and the requirements, we do have to follow them. I will say that at the beginning of the school year, it was more of a battle, and I didn't even view it in a negative way, but more of a battle getting the parents to understand that it wasn't something that was our choice. Our choice was do what the requirements say, which is have staff, faculty, students wear masks in the building or not operate. And so that was difficult because I think there was this misunderstanding that as a charter school, we could kind of do what we wanted or give parents the choice, and that just, it wasn't our option. If we wanted to have school, we had to abide by the regulations. And so at the very beginning, it was just kind of a struggle, making sure that parents understood that we heard them, we sympathized with them, but that it really wasn't up to us. And that actually kind of turned into a struggle where I felt like some students were kind of put in the middle. And I say that because, we have the school who has to enforce mask wearing, and then some parents who kind of just told their students, you don't have to do this. And so it put the students kind of in a weird situation where they were in the middle. And so that did require us to have some additional conversations with families and just reiterate, like, look, we understand where you're coming from. However, is this what's best for the student? And then as far as my personal beliefs, I definitely understood where those parents were coming from. I don't think it's best for the students and their health. But we do make an effort to give the students breaks outside. They do not have to wear the masks outside, so they do have opportunities where they can go have recess, take them off, get some fresh air, breathe, and just put them back on in the classroom. What we did strive to do was not make the masks a big deal. So our focus is on educating the students, doing what they need to do in the classroom. And so we tried really hard to not make a big issue about it. If there was a student who, was not wearing their mask, we tried to remind them quietly to do so. We just didn't want to make a big deal about it. And we felt that, the same with classroom management, teaching them procedures about how to do it, what to do, has really, I guess, it's not that big of an issue at this point in the school year. So we try to keep our focus on educating them and Yeah.
So somebody who's a mask advocate who happens to stumble upon this podcast, you would disabuse them of the notion, however, that having a mask on for 7 or so hours a day on a child it is a big deal. It's not a trivial issue. There's a lot of people who are on the other side of this debate that seem to think, oh, don't worry about it. It's only a mask and it's only for 6 or 7 hours a day.
Yeah, it's a long time. And just kind of thinking of, some of the students, these are kiddos. And, you ask families, please send your student with a clean mask, or, we can provide a mask for your student if they don't have one. Man, some of the masks I saw and see, I have to tell kiddos, why don't you put that one in your backpack? Let's get you a clean one, because, yeah, 5 and 6-year-olds with mask cleanliness is not a thing. They're gross. And breathing in that disgusting, I don't even want to know what's on that thing. If clean ones aren't the best, I can't even imagine what those dirty ones are doing to those poor kiddos. So,
well,
rough.
I'm also sure you're in a school with kindergartners and first graders. Proper masking is probably not something that kindergartners and first graders are very strong with.
There's a lot of face touching. There's a lot of, adjusting and just, boogers.
I believe 360 plus episodes in, you may be the first person to utter the word boogers on this podcast. So thank you for that.
You're welcome.
It makes sense because you are the educator that we go to. You're our go-to educator. So thank you. Excellent. All right. Well, we just have a few minutes remaining in the podcast. I do want to touch base with you. Studies have shown that academics have suffered, especially with kids out of the classroom for long periods of time. I know your school prides itself on strong academic performance, and let's just say that I'm I'm a believer that the average family that sends their child to Estancia Valley Classical Academy tends to value academics and be willing to push their children and not just let them sit in front of the PlayStation for 8-10 hours a day, as may be the case. Now, that doesn't mean everybody, especially during the pandemic, was able to do the best they could. But have you noticed? I mean, what have you noticed in terms of student outcomes and just the challenges they've faced academically?
So we definitely have noticed that there is some gaps in the learning, and it's for a variety of different reasons. So even before last school year where a lot of it was in remote or hybrid, even before that, the school year before, the schools were essentially closed in March.
Right.
So we had some students who came in at the beginning of this school year, and they had not been in school in basically a year and a half. So, it was kind of this recognition. The students who were coming in our doors this school year as second graders, they were in kindergarten for a few months. Mm-hmm. And then their school year ended. And then last school year, they received, half of the instruction face-to-face. And so half of the instruction they received online, and we really didn't have any control over what happened at home with those students. So when they came in this school year, there was a definite just kind of recognition that, wow, these students are not where they should be at the beginning of this school year. And I use second grade as the example, but it really was across the board. There was a lot of instruction and education that was just lost. And so we do have our teachers now kind of focusing on, okay, what are the most important pieces of information that these students need to receive? And there is a lot of, we're doing after school tutoring, we're doing kind of a lot of intervention work with students just to try to make sure that where they would need to be had this not happened. And it has been a struggle. Another piece of it is there's kind of habits that are learned in school. And so when you take a student out of that environment and those habits aren't happening at home, there are some, I guess, some study skills, some motivational skills that are lost. And so we're trying to rebuild those things. Something as simple as, well, you say it's simple, but upon reflection, we found out it's not, but having a discussion with students in the classroom. Upon coming back this school year, the teachers actually found that it was kind of like pulling teeth to get students to want to participate and talk and answer questions, just because it had been so long since they'd been in a classroom environment where they were interacting with each other and having, academic conversations. And so it was kind of trying to rebuild those skills, even something like talking to each other in a classroom. And so there are definite gaps as far as academics goes, as far as kind of rebuilding social skills. And yeah, it's definitely been interesting. And our teachers are being very innovative. They're adapting. They're working extremely hard because this is a very hard school year.
Yeah. Just a couple more questions for you. So, do you see the money that the state is going to be dumping into education or has been dumping into education? Is that going to make a difference with all of the issues? I mean, I know 7% teacher pay now. New inflation reports come out and say we're at 9.6% month over month inflation. So it may get eaten up by that. But the state is going to be spending a lot of money and has been spending a lot of money on education. What do you see that having an impact at all?
I see it having an impact in that right now there is a teacher shortage. So, this idea of the pay raises for teachers, I would hope would bring more educators into the circle. However, there has been an increase in insurance every year as well. So I'm not sure how much of that increase the teachers would actually see. Money is nice, but it doesn't fix all problems. So I think it just depends on how it's spent and where it's spent, to make sure that it goes to what the students and the teachers need and not, I don't know how to say it, not programs that are pushed by outsiders that don't necessarily help the students the way that they need to be helped.
For the record, I did not tell her to say that. That is very along the lines of what I would have told her to say had I done that, but she said that on her own. I completely agree with you, needless to say. And I don't think the additional money is going to solve the teacher supply chain issues you're having, along with everybody else trying to find workers. It is a real challenge. I'm sure Estancia Valley Classical Academy has unique clientele, both in terms of its students as well as its teachers, who I'm sure like teaching there. But we've just seen a fundamental shift in the jobs market, and until some very big changes happen at the federal and state level, I don't see that really resolving itself. And the last thing is, I'm assuming and hoping, but you talked about socialization, and there's been a lot of fights. There's been a lot of issues around the country and here in New Mexico in schools. Have you seen any of that at Estancia Valley Classical Academy, or are your kids generally willing to not get in fisticuffs?
We have typical kiddos. We have had some students have struggles this year. We have tried our best to encourage them to have conversations. So anytime we hear that so and so wants to fight this other student, we'll actually have conversations with those students immediately. And so as far as this school year goes, we have not had any fist fights. It seems to be more of students wanting to, I don't want to say avoid each other, but they're struggling kind of interacting more so than feeling the need to, I guess, disagree with each other. It's more of almost wanting to isolate themselves because they haven't been socializing the way that they had before. But man, they're doing good. Honestly, I'm really proud of them. We've had some students who have overcome some major struggles and who just continue to work. And, even though some of them aren't academically where we know they could be, they're working really hard. So I'm super proud of all of them. They're doing a good job.
All right. Well, thank you for your candid comments. And I know there's a lot of sensitive issues we've touched upon. And I don't normally do an editorial moment at the end of a podcast, but Michelle Lujan Grisham, if you're out there listening, please take your boot off the necks of New Mexico children and families and the education system. You are having a huge negative impact on our children, and stop it. Thanks for listening to this week's episode. Find all episodes at tippingpointnm.com or at the Rio Grande Foundation's YouTube channel. Subscribe to this show at Apple, Stitcher, or have your Google Home play Tipping Point New Mexico. Thanks to Path 3 Marketing for producing this show.